There was one time I watched a movie when the main character sacrificed himself to save his people. I told my father that I wanted to also sacrifice and bleed for the people I love and admire. My father just laughed and looked at me with a smile. But suddenly, his face changed into that of a serious one, and he said, "Son, do you really want to know the true meaning of sacrifice? Sit down and let me tell you a story about it." That was when he started.
It was February 28th. The sun was rising slowly over Accra, casting golden light over the palm trees and the dusty streets still heavy with colonial tension. In the heart of a land stolen and renamed the Gold Coast, three men marched with quiet determination, dressed not in rebellion, but in the uniforms of soldiers. Sergeant Cornelius Francis Ajete, Corporal Patrick ATTIPOE, Private Odate Lamte. Three men, three ranks, one purpose: to demand the dignity of those who had served and bled for an empire that had never called them sons. They had faced bullets before, for the British, but now as they marched toward the Osu Castle, they would face them for Ghana, and this time they would fall not as servants of empire, but as heroes of freedom. Long before they were martyrs, they were sons of mothers who danced to drums and prayed under stars. They grew up in a land of rivers and stories, in villages where proverbs taught more than textbooks. Ajete, born in 1902, was a disciplined, sharp-minded man with a face hardened by years of war. He had served bravely in Burma during World War II, fighting for the British against Japanese forces. In battle, he earned not just medals, but the quiet respect of his men. Ajiti and Lamti were younger but no less devoted. They joined the Gold Coast Regiment out of a sense of duty, lured by promises of honor, pensions, and a better life for their families. They fought in Europe, Asia, and North Africa, not as Ghanaians but as anonymous Africans beneath the Union Jack. They fought and watched their brothers die, far from home. They buried friends in foreign soil. They returned with broken limbs and haunted minds. And when they came home, all they asked for was the pension they were promised. They were ignored. In the years after the war, returning African veterans were tossed aside like worn boots. British officers lived in whitewashed bungalows. African soldiers who had risked just as much were given poverty and silence. Accra began to boil. The air was thick with injustice. Workers protested, farmers whispered, students read leaflets under moonlight. And at the center of it all, veterans gathered, organizing under the ex-servicemen's union, demanding what was rightfully theirs. They did not ask for power, they asked for justice. When petitions were ignored and letters unanswered, the union decided they would march, not with weapons, not with violence, but with discipline and dignity. They chose three men to lead the march: Sergeant Ajeti, the leader; Corporal Atipo, the communicator; Private Lamti, the youngest but the most spirited. February 28, 1948. They wore their war uniforms, not in defiance, but in pride. The march started at Accra Post Office as dozens of veterans fell into line, boots crunching the dry earth. They marched through Makola, past vendors and taxi boys. Some watched in silence, others saluted. The city could feel something turning, like history folding itself into place. Women whispered prayers, children watched wide-eyed. Old men nodded with pride. At the front were the three. Ajeti's jaw was clenched tight. Atipo gripped the petition. Lamti hummed a war song under his breath. Their destination, the Osu Castle, home of the British governor. Their goal, deliver a petition for fair treatment. Their belief, they would be heard. As the veterans approached the castle road, they found it barricaded. A line of British policemen stood blocking the path, rifles slung over their shoulders. "Disperse," one officer barked. "This march is unauthorized." Ajeti stepped forward calmly, holding out the petition. "We have no weapons. We are soldiers. We seek dialogue." Corporal Atipo added, "We served this empire. We bled for it, but fear gripped the British. To them, even a peaceful African was a threat. Even a folded paper was a revolution." Suddenly, a shot rang out, a single sharp echo, then two more. Bang, 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 bang. Ajeti fell first, clutching his chest. Atipo reached for him and was struck in the head. Lamti turned to run and was shot in the back. Blood stained the red earth. 3 soldiers, 3 corpses, 3 symbols. The march had ended, but the fight had just begun. News spread like wildfire. Women screamed in the streets. Market stalls were overturned. Students tore down colonial posters. Riots erupted across Accra. Shops owned by British and Lebanese merchants were looted. Police stations were attacked. Smoke coiled into the sky as if mourning the fallen soldiers. The 1948 Accra riots would become a turning point. For the first time, ordinary citizens saw the colonial power not just as unjust, but murderous. The image of three unarmed veterans, gunned down for demanding justice, broke something inside the people. In their deaths, Ajeti, ATTIPOE, and Lamti became immortal. Their sacrifice shook the empire. The British government launched the Watson Commission to investigate the riots. Political leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and Dr. J.B. Dankwa, who had been advocating for independence, now had the moral wind at their backs. The people began to chant louder, "Freedom!" The deaths of the three ex-servicemen galvanized the United Gold Coast Convention and birthed momentum for the Convention People's Party. Within 9 years, Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence in 1957. And while politicians stood on platforms, making speeches and cutting ribbons, those who truly cracked the walls of empire lay beneath the ground. 3 soldiers, 3 patriots, 3 martyrs. Decades later, in a quiet compound in Jamestown, an old woman sits beneath a mango tree. She is Ama Ajete, the widow of the sergeant. She never remarried. Every year, on the 28th of February, she lays white flowers on the memorial at the Osu Cemetery, where her husband and his comrades are buried. "I told him not to go," she whispers, "but he said if I do nothing, our children will live in chains." Her voice cracks. "My son asks me why I still cry. I tell him some deaths don't end. They echo." She takes out a faded photo. 3 men in uniform, standing tall, smiling under the West African sun. Heroes, before the bullets. Today, their names live on. The 28th February Road in Accra. The 28th February Christian Bog, Crossroads Shooting Incident Monument, where they fell. The National Remembrance Ceremonies. History books that carry their faces. But beyond the names and statues lies something deeper. They didn't die because they hated. They didn't die to kill. They died because they believed that all men, regardless of skin, language, or class, deserve dignity. They died believing that the black man's blood was not cheaper than the white man's signature, and they died hoping that no other Ghanaian would have to choose between silence and sacrifice. The story of Sergeant Ajite, Corporal ATTIPOE, and Private Lamte is not just a chapter in Ghana's history. It is a mirror held up to power, a reminder that freedom is not gifted. It is earned, often through pain. A lesson that heroism is not just in war zones, but in marches, petitions, and principled defiance. These men did not lift rifles, they lifted truth. And the world responded with bullets, but even bullets cannot kill purpose. In every child who salutes the Ghanaian flag, in every student who learns their names, in every citizen who votes freely, in every protester who speaks truth to power, the march continues. They died for Ghana before Ghana had a name. They earned its birth certificate with their blood. And so, when the sun rises every 28th of February, we stand still, we bow our heads, we remember Sergeant Ajete, Corporal ATTIPOE, Private Lamte. They were soldiers, they were men, they were heroes, and their last march still echoes in the heartbeat of a nation. Subscribe to watch more videos like this.